January 17th, 1942. Dawn breaks over a frozen river cutting through the forested outskirts of Eastern Europe. Ice cracks beneath the weight of German panzers advancing with mechanical precision. Their engines roar, echoing off snow-laden trees, a metallic symphony of impending destruction. A lone artillery gunner crouches behind the earthworks, frost stiffening his fingers, eyes fixed on the bridge ahead. Each heartbeat is a drum against the cold silence, each breath visible in the sharp morning air. Smoke curls from distant shells, mixing with the scent of powder and frozen soil. He adjusts the delay fuses meticulously, aware that one miscalculation could mean annihilation, not just for his unit, but for the fragile bridge that now holds the fate of 12 tanks. Soldiers around him whisper under their breath, tense, each waiting for the invisible signal. Above, the first Panzer tracks grind onto the wooden planks, unaware of the trap set beneath them. The bridge creaks under their weight, a fragile line between destruction and survival. One decision, one fuse, could change everything. And in the stillness before the thunder, destiny waits. By early 1942, the Eastern Front had become a frozen battlefield of immense scale. Following the initial successes of Operation Barbarossa, German panzer divisions pushed deep into Soviet territory, aiming to seize key logistical hubs and disrupt defensive lines. Every river, every bridge became a strategic artery. The bridge in question, spanning a narrow but critical river near the small town of Zelenograd, was more than a crossing. It was a lifeline. For the Germans, controlling it meant rapid advancement. For the defending forces, its destruction could halt an entire armored column. Intelligence reports had indicated the route was vital for the 12th Panzer Regiment, moving from staging positions in the northern sector to reinforce. Units engaged further south. Defending forces were outnumbered and outgunned, yet they had one advantage: preparation. Artillery units had been stationed along the riverbanks weeks prior, trained not just to shell enemy positions, but to execute precise demolitions. Engineers had assessed the bridge's weak points, noting the wooden planks, steel trusses, and supporting beams. Delay fuses, relatively simple devices that allowed a timed detonation after impact, were installed on critical supports. Unlike standard explosives, these fuses could be set to detonate seconds after the initial strike, enabling defenders to lure enemy tanks onto the structure before triggering its collapse. The geography of the region worked in favor of the defenders. The river's edges were lined with dense trees, providing cover for artillery crews and infantry observers. Snow muffled movement, but made tracks visible, giving advance warning of approaching vehicles. Beyond the bridge, a narrow, ice-laden road twisted toward the main supply route, leaving little room for maneuver. Any error in timing could be catastrophic. The panzer crews, relying on reconnaissance reports, expected a standard crossing. No ambush, no hidden trap. The unit responsible for the bridge's defense was small, but highly trained. Composed of seasoned artillerymen and engineers, they had faced German attacks before and understood the importance of precision under pressure. Commanders emphasized discipline. Every fuse had to be set to the exact millisecond. One early detonation risked alerting the enemy and leaving the defenders vulnerable. Too late, and the tanks could cross safely, rendering the trap useless. Soldiers spent nights drilling, walking the bridge under moonlight, simulating weight and calculating the load each beam could bear before failing. The gunner assigned to the delay fuses, Lieutenant Pavel Ivanov, was particularly meticulous. Known for his calm under fire, he had studied the physics of collapse and the mechanics of German armor, anticipating the weight and speed of approaching Panzers. Meanwhile, German intelligence underestimated the defenders' preparations. Reports noted light resistance in the area, creating a false sense of security. Reconnaissance had detected minor fortifications, but nothing suggested a fully coordinated demolition plan. The 12 Panzers, fresh from prior engagements, were eager to advance quickly. Their crews trusted in the reliability of their tracks, their weight, and the durability of the bridge. Each tank carried a full complement of ammunition, adding to the danger should the structure fail beneath them. As the morning approached, tension rose on both sides. For the gunner, it was a moment of calculation and nerves. For the Panzer crews, it was another routine maneuver along a frozen river. Unknown to them, every plank, beam, and steel support had been analyzed, measured, and fitted with explosives designed for a single purpose: to collapse the bridge at the precise moment 12 German tanks were upon it. Seconds would decide the outcome, and the frozen river awaited its reckoning. This careful preparation, the melding of engineering precision with human courage, set the stage for an extraordinary moment. The world beyond the river continued its war, unaware of the confrontation about to unfold. The frozen bridge, a fragile line between life and destruction, stood silent, hiding the ingenuity that could alter the course of a Panzer advance. And as the first tracks began to crunch over the snow, every calculation, every fuse, every trained hand would be tested. In the days leading up to the operation, SMAs, skirmishes had already tested the nerves of both sides. Reconnaissance units scouted the area, exchanging sporadic fire with hidden defenders, leaving traces in the snow that hinted at movement, but revealed nothing of the true trap. Local terrain knowledge became invaluable. Frozen marshes and hidden embankments limited where tanks could maneuver, forcing them onto predictable paths. The defenders exploited this, funneling the approaching Panzer regiment toward the bridge. Every snowdrift, every fallen tree was studied for tactical advantage. The delay fuse strategy itself was a recent innovation for the unit. Traditional demolitions relied on instantaneous detonation or simple timed explosives, often triggered by manual switches or tripwires. Lieutenant Ivanov, working closely with the engineers, adapted a design that combined impact sensitivity with adjustable delay intervals. The plan required precision. The first shells would strike the bridge supports just as the lead tank's tracks passed over. Then, after a fraction of a second, the explosives would detonate, collapsing the structure beneath all 12 tanks. Any miscalculation could either leave the bridge intact or destroy it too early, exposing the gunner and his team to immediate counterfire. While engineers prepared the bridge, infantry units patrolled the surrounding forest. Their role was critical: to observe, report, and prevent the Germans from detecting the trap. Scouts recorded the Panzer formation, estimated their speed, and noted the order of movement. Observers calculated the bridge's load-bearing limits in real time, adjusting the placement of explosives accordingly. Every soldier, from the gunner to the spotters, understood that a single error would cost lives and equipment. German units advanced with confidence, relying on their superior mobility and armored protection. Commanders expected resistance, but not a calculated demolition at the heart of their crossing route. The 12 Panzers, including several Panzer IIIs and IVs, moved in tight formation, their treads grinding snow into powder beneath them. Radio chatter crackled intermittently, reporting positions, fuel levels, and estimated arrival times. For the German crews, the bridge represented a routine logistical point. A short pause, in a long advance. Yet unseen beneath their steel tracks, the defenders' strategy lay in wait. Psychologically, the tension was palpable. Lieutenant Ivanov spent hours visualizing the sequence of the collapse, imagining each tank's weight and timing every fraction of a second. Soldiers practiced under simulated conditions, dropping weighted sleds to measure stress on beams, adjusting explosives for the most effective detonation. They trained their ears to the creaks of the bridge, the subtle shifts in frozen timber, signals that would indicate whether their calculations would hold. Even the weather played a role. Morning frost could alter the wood's flexibility, snow could hide weaknesses, and wind could affect fuse ignition. Every variable mattered. By the night before the anticipated attack, the defenders had achieved a delicate balance of secrecy, preparation, and timing. The Panzer column, unaware of the trap, had already left its staging area, moving under the assumption of minimal resistance. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Ivanov and his team double-checked each fuse, ensuring the timing mechanism was exact. This operation, though small in scale compared to the larger Eastern Front battles, represented the intersection of human ingenuity and mechanical precision, a microcosm of war itself. The stage was set, the river frozen, the bridge fortified with hidden explosives, the forest silently watching, and 12 German tanks approaching in oblivious formation. Each side relied on its strengths, the defenders on precision and ingenuity, the attackers on speed and armored might. Soon, these opposing forces would collide, and the river would become the site of a calculated disaster that would echo through reports and memoirs. The tension, invisible to those beyond the river, was almost unbearable. Every man knew that the coming hours would test their training, their courage, and the limits of engineering under fire. As the first faint rumble of engines reached the ears of the defenders, the moment approached when preparation would meet action. The frozen river, the narrow bridge, and the 12 unsuspecting Panzers all converged on a single fateful line. And at the heart of it, Lieutenant Ivanov adjusted his fuse settings one last time, knowing that the success of the operation and the survival of his men depended entirely on the seconds to come. Lieutenant Pavel Ivanov was a man defined by calm precision. At 29, he had already seen the brutality of the Eastern Front and understood the weight of command, even in small operations. His eyes, sharp beneath frost-lined brows, scanned the bridge continuously. Every decision rested on him, every calculation a potential lifeline, or a death sentence. Soldiers around him looked to him for reassurance, for certainty in a moment when certainty seemed impossible. He did not speak much. Actions mattered more than words. A subtle nod, a small adjustment to a fuse, the measured placement of a shell. These were his language. He had studied German armor, memorized tank weights, and calculated the precise delay required to collapse the bridge under 12 fully loaded Panzers. His calm was contagious, a human anchor in a landscape of tension and frozen metal. Other soldiers, though less experienced, relied on this steadiness. The infantry observers in the surrounding woods watched the approaching Panzers, their breath visible in the frigid air. Each man's body was rigid with cold, their fingers numb, yet their senses were acute. Every crunch of snow, every subtle vibration through the timber bridge became a signal. Fear was present, but it was disciplined, a tool rather than a paralyzing force. The human element in this operation was not merely courage. It was coordination under extreme pressure, a collective focus where one misstep could unravel weeks of preparation. From a tactical perspective, The defenders had engineered an ideal kill zone. The bridge itself was a choke point, a narrow structure with no alternative routes for heavy armor. Panzer commanders, confident in speed and surprise, were funneled precisely where defenders wanted them. The surrounding forest and marshes acted as natural barriers, limiting maneuver and preventing flanking. Artillery was positioned with overlapping fields of fire, not to destroy the tanks outright, but to control movement and ensure they crossed the bridge in sequence. Observers calculated distance, speed, and trajectory, feeding data to the gunner adjusting the fuses. The delay fuse strategy was itself a tactical masterstroke. Traditional demolitions would have required either manual detonation, risking detection and counterfire, or rigid timing that could misalign with moving targets. By combining impact-sensitive shells with adjustable delays, defenders created a scenario in which the bridge became both a lure and a trap. Each Panzer that entered the structure unknowingly contributed to the conditions for its own immobilization. Tactical control extended beyond raw firepower. It leveraged geography, timing, and mechanical reliability. The operation exemplified a philosophy of minimal risk with maximum effect. Destroy the target efficiently while preserving defender lives. Technology, though simple by today's standards, played a decisive role. The delay fuse, an engineered mechanism that allowed milliseconds of lag between impact and detonation, was critical. Each explosive charge was placed with precision on load-bearing beams. The team calculated the weight tolerance of each timber plank and steel truss, ensuring the structure would collapse predictably under the combined mass of 12 tanks. Even minor miscalculations, overestimation of timber strength, misplacement of charges, or incorrect fuse timing could render the plan ineffective. The Panzer tanks themselves represented a different technological force. German engineering had produced highly reliable machines capable of rapid movement over challenging terrain. Panzer IIIs and IVs carried armor and armaments sufficient to intimidate infantry and light artillery. Yet these machines, formidable in open terrain, were vulnerable when confined to a rigid path like a bridge. The defenders understood that the very technology that made the tanks powerful, their weight, tracks, and momentum, could be exploited as a weapon against them. By aligning explosives and fuses with mechanical precision, the gunner turned the enemy's engineering advantages into their Achilles' heel. Coordination of human and technological elements was seamless. Observers tracked the lead tank, timing every second. The gunner adjusted each fuse based on precise weight calculations. Explosives were armed incrementally, ensuring safety while maintaining readiness. Even the freezing temperatures, which could alter fuse ignition or timber elasticity, were accounted for in both calculations and testing. The technology was simple, but its integration into human strategy created a force multiplier far beyond the sum of its parts. Leadership in this operation was subtle yet decisive. Lieutenant Ivanov, though directly responsible for the gunner team, relied heavily on clear communication with his commanding officer, Captain Mikhail Sokolov. Sokolov, positioned further back along the ridge, had a broader view of the river and the surrounding terrain. His role was to oversee coordination, maintain supply of shells, and ensure the infantry observers relayed accurate updates. Unlike large-scale battles where strategy unfolds over days, this operation demanded instantaneous decision-making. Sokolov's leadership was defined by trust. Trust in Ivanov's technical expertise, trust in his soldiers' discipline, and trust in a plan that hinged on fractions of a second. Orders were precise and minimal. Soldiers understood their responsibilities without constant oversight. This clarity of command prevented hesitation or confusion when the moment arrived. Leadership here was not loud or theatrical. It was measured, deliberate and omnipresent in every adjustment, every glance, and every silent confirmation of a soldier's readiness. It exemplified a philosophy where small units with skilled leadership could achieve outsized effects against mechanized forces far superior in raw power. The German panzers approached with confidence born from training and prior victories. 12 tanks, crewed by experienced soldiers, relied on the standard doctrine of rapid movement and armored dominance. The lead tank, a Panzer IV, carried a full complement of ammunition, its tracks gripping the snow with ease. German commanders assumed a straightforward crossing. Scouts had reported light resistance, and intelligence underestimated the presence of demolition on preparations. Yet even the most formidable tanks are constrained by geography. The frozen river, narrow bridge, and forested banks limited options. Any evasive maneuver was impossible. Speed became a liability. The panzer crews did not know they were entering a trap engineered with patience, observation, and meticulous planning. Their strength, their armor, firepower, and mobility would paradoxically amplify their vulnerability. The very design of these tanks, meant for rapid penetration of enemy lines, made them susceptible to collapse when the defenders exploited predictable paths and physics. In the enemy's perspective, the bridge was routine, a simple logistical point. But for the defenders, it was a fulcrum upon which the outcome would pivot. The psychological stakes in this operation were immense, even for seasoned soldiers. For defenders, tension oscillated between focused determination and raw fear. Each creak of the bridge, each approaching track, reminded them that miscalculation could be fatal. Yet fear was harnessed as a tool. It sharpened attention, reinforced discipline, and instilled a heightened sense of responsibility. The human mind, under stress, can falter. Here, it became an instrument of precision. On the German side, the illusion of safety contributed to vulnerability. The crews were unaware of the imminent danger, their confidence bolstered by standard procedures and prior victories. Morale was high. The psychological edge lay entirely with the defenders. The first moments of impact, when shells struck the bridge and the delay fuse began its work, would create immediate confusion and panic. Soldiers would struggle to comprehend the sudden collapse of a structure they assumed was reliable. The moral dimension also extended to the calculus of war. The defenders did not target the tanks with aimless destruction. They leveraged physics and engineering to neutralize threats efficiently. Lives were spared by creating a controlled trap rather than engaging in prolonged direct fire. The operation reflects the brutal but rational calculations inherent in wartime decision-making. Ingenuity used to achieve maximal strategic effect with minimal unnecessary risk. In this way, the psychological and moral elements were intertwined. Understanding the enemy's expectations, controlling one's own fear, and executing precise actions under pressure were all facets of the same human and ethical equation. Together, these perspectives demonstrate a multifaceted operation. Leadership provided direction without micromanagement, allowing human skill to flourish. Tactical planning ensured the enemy was funneled into a zone where physics and engineering could be applied. Technology, both in explosives and enemy armor, dictated the parameters of action. The human mind, disciplined under pressure, synchronized these elements seamlessly. On the other side, the German panzers' mechanical confidence and lack of awareness amplified the effectiveness of the defenders' ingenuity. Psychologically, the operation capitalized on controlled fear and expectation, creating a moment where preparation would meet opportunity. As the panzer column crept closer, every angle, human, tactical, technological, leadership, enemy, moral, converged. The frozen river, the narrow bridge, and the carefully set fuses became the stage for a decisive act. Seconds would decide whether weeks of preparation and months of experience could translate into victory. The tension was absolute. Each soldier, each tank, and each mechanical component played its part in a choreography dictated by timing, skill, and courage. The SCE was set for the ultimate test. The execution of the delay fuse strategy, when preparation, calculation, and human ingenuity would collide with the unstoppable force of armored warfare. And in this convergence, history would pause for a moment, suspended between anticipation and chaos. January 17th, 1942. By mid-morning, the rumble of 12 German Panzers grew louder, echoing across the frozen river valley. Lieutenant Ivanov remained crouched behind his earthworks, eyes locked on the bridge. Every detail mattered: the angle of each plank, the precise weight of each tank, the tiny fraction of a second needed to trigger the explosives. The lead Panzer, a Panzer IV, crested the bank and rolled onto the first wooden beams. Its tracks groaned against the icy timber, sending vibrations up the structure, vibrations that Ivanov and his team had calculated in painstaking detail. The first shell fired from the artillery position struck the bridge's main truss. The impact was barely perceptible to the untrained eye, a subtle shudder, a small cloud of splintered wood. But for Ivanov, it was the signal. The delay fuse began its countdown. Seconds passed. The second Panzer rolled forward, its weight compounding the stress on the weakened supports. The bridge creaked audibly, a high-pitched protest against the immense load. Observers in the surrounding forest counted each heartbeat, each second measured with military precision. The frozen ground amplified every sound: the grinding of treads, the snap of timber, the faint hiss of explosives being triggered. The next shells struck in a calculated sequence. Each hit was designed not to destroy the bridge immediately, but to prime it, to prepare it to fail at the exact moment all 12 tanks were positioned above its critical supports. Ivanov's hands, steady despite the cold, adjusted a fuse by millimeters. Each adjustment accounted for weight distribution, tank speed, and structural integrity. One miscalculation could mean the lead tank passed safely, or detonate too soon, alerting the Germans and risking lives. From the German perspective, everything seemed routine. The lead Panzer rolled forward confidently, followed by its companions in tight formation. Crew members reported tracks clear, structure stable. Commanders, observing via radio, underestimated the threat. No reconnaissance had suggested demolition. The bridge was, in their calculations, a safe passage, a small obstacle on a vast front line. But unseen beneath the steel and snow, the defenders' plan was entering its final, crucial phase. Ivanov's heart remained calm, a counterpoint to the tension around him. He had trained for this moment, and every calculation now aligned. The lead tank reached the midpoint of the bridge. Its full weight pressed down on the primed beams. Then, in a fraction of a second, the delay fuse activated. A deep, resonant explosion shook the river valley, reverberating through the frozen ground. Timber and steel screamed as supports failed, bending under the combined load of the lead and second tanks. Chaos erupted. The first tank shuddered violently as beams collapsed beneath it, trapping its tracks. Smoke and splintered wood filled the air, momentarily obscuring visibility. German crews struggled to assess the damage, some attempting to reverse, others firing blindly toward the bank where they assumed artillery had struck. Behind the river, Ivanov and his team watched, tense but ready. They had anticipated secondary explosions, additional fires, and structural shifts, and their position allowed for observation while minimizing exposure. The collapse did not occur uniformly, and the bridge twisted and sagged in sections, creating pockets where each subsequent Panzer became ensnared. Timing was perfect. The delay fuses allowed the first tank to be fully on the weak points before detonation, maximizing the destructive effect. By the time the third and fourth tanks reached critical areas, the bridge was already failing, leaving the Panzers trapped in sequence. The sound of metal twisting, beams snapping, and engines straining filled the valley, a terrifying symphony of destruction. On the riverbank, soldiers quietly counted the trapped vehicles. Each tank immobilized reinforced the effectiveness of the plan. Ivanov, his hands finally still, observed that every calculation had been validated. The frozen river, the narrow bridge, and the disciplined timing had converged perfectly. Human skill, tactical foresight, and mechanical precision had neutralized an armored column 12 vehicles strong. Even as the dust and smoke lingered, the defenders maintained vigilance. Secondary explosives were on standby to prevent German crews from attempting rapid escape or recovery. Infantry observers moved cautiously, reporting any changes in tank position. The success of the initial collapse did not guarantee total safety. War demanded continued attention. This moment, the bridge partially collapsed, the Panzer column trapped, crews scrambling, marked the turning point of the operation. Preparation had met execution in a manner that few in the theater of war would witness directly. The combination of human ingenuity, tactical planning, and technological manipulation had created a decisive event. For the German crews, it was confusion and terror. For the defenders, the tense satisfaction of a plan flawlessly executed. In these first critical minutes, every element, timing, weight, structure, human response, aligned. The frozen river became a theater of mechanical immobility, a choke point transformed into a grave for armored vehicles. Reports and later memoirs would highlight this as a remarkable case of engineering and strategic brilliance. Yet for those present, the moment was not yet over. The following minutes would determine whether the trapped tanks could be salvaged or whether the operation would achieve total neutralization of the Panzer threat. The stage was set for the continuation of the climax, the complete collapse of the bridge and the immobilization of all 12 Panzers. The tension, the calculation, and the human stakes remained unresolved, holding the audience on the edge of anticipation. The seconds following the initial detonation became a controlled chaos. The first Panzer, trapped mid-bridge, groaned as its tracks sank into fractured beams. Smoke curled from splintered timber, mixing with the acrid scent of burning fuel and overheated engines. The remaining tanks, tightly following in formation, had little room to maneuver. The second Panzer slid sideways as a support truss gave way beneath it, its hull scraping metal against shattered wood. The frozen river reflected fragments of steel and snow as the collapse progressed, like a carefully timed domino effect. Lieutenant Ivanov observed from his concealed position, calculating the unfolding sequence in real time. He had prepared for minor deviations, beams failing earlier than expected, or tanks jolting unpredictably, but each element fell precisely into place. By the time the third Panzer reached the midsection, the bridge had already twisted under the strain, leaving it partially suspended over the river. The delay fuses ensured the final explosion synchronized with the vehicle's position, maximizing entrapment without sacrificing defender safety. For the German crews, the bridge had become a trap. They could neither reverse nor escape. Inside the tanks, confusion spread rapidly. Commands clashed over radios as crews attempted to assess the damage. The lead tank's engine roared futilely, treads spinning against the broken timbers. Men scrambled within armored compartments, some trying to engage the artillery supposedly firing from the banks, others frantically coordinating movement to prevent the bridge from collapsing further. Panic replaced the calm professionalism that had carried them to this point. The sound of twisting metal, snapping wood, and cascading debris filled every compartment, creating a sensory assault no crew had trained for. The defenders' artillery and infantry maintained disciplined observation. Secondary charges, target critical support beams if any tank attempted escape, remained on standby. The operation demanded patience even in the moment of triumph. Impulsive engagement could undo the success. Ivanov's team silently monitored the progression, confirming that all 12 tanks had reached positions above the weakened structure. One misstep could allow the final Panzers to retreat, negating the carefully prepared trap. As the final shells detonated, the bridge fully gave way. 12 German tanks came to a sudden, immobilized halt, entangled in fractured beams and ice. Some were partially submerged in the freezing river. Others teetered precariously over broken planks. Engines stalled, turret hatches jammed, and radio communications became sporadic as crews attempted desperate maneuvers. The scale of immobilization was total. What had been a rapid advance now became a tableau of chaos and helplessness, frozen in both time and space. On the banks, defenders allowed themselves measured relief. The risk had not entirely passed, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. The combination of precise human execution, technological timing, and tactical planning had achieved what seemed improbable. 12 formidable armored vehicles rendered powerless by a single, carefully engineered demolition. Soldiers surveyed the scene with cautious satisfaction, aware that the operation would be remembered as an example of tactical brilliance and human ingenuity in war. German command, initially unaware of the trap's sophistication, began to comprehend the scale of failure. Communications crackled as commanders demanded reports from immobilized crews. Reconnaissance units, now delayed and disoriented, struggled to understand the sudden immobilization of an entire Panzer column. Some attempted to call in engineering detachments to salvage vehicles, but frozen conditions and structural instability prevented immediate recovery. What had been planned as a routine crossing had become a tactical disaster, delaying operations and forcing a re-evaluation of enemy capability in the region. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. For the defenders, the success reinforced confidence in ingenuity over brute force. For the Germans, the incident became a stark lesson in vulnerability and the unpredictable nature of war. Even the most heavily armored and well-trained units were not invincible when faced with careful observation, precise engineering, and disciplined execution. The moment exemplified how individual initiative and small unit strategy could disrupt larger operational plans. In the aftermath of the collapse, soldiers approached KU tirelessly, surveying the immobilized tanks. Some crews attempted to escape, wading through the icy river or clambering over broken beams. Others remained trapped inside, engines dead, confined by twisted metal. Smoke continued to rise from damaged vehicles, mingling with the river mist and frost-laden air. Observers counted each immobilized tank, confirming that all 12 were affected. The scale of success exceeded expectations. The carefully calculated timing and placement of explosives had achieved maximum disruption with minimal exposure to defenders. Historical accounts later highlighted this moment as a rare example of tactical precision meeting opportunity. Memoirs of soldiers on both sides emphasized the combination of fear, calculation, and ingenuity that defined the encounter. Lieutenant Ivanov's role, in particular, was recognized as pivotal. By blending human judgment with technical skill, he had transformed a fragile bridge into a decisive instrument of war. The event became emblematic of small unit effectiveness, where strategy, timing, and courage outweighed numerical superiority. As the dust settled and smoke dissipated, the frozen river bore the scars of destruction. The bridge, once a simple crossing point, now stood fractured and useless. 12 German Panzers remained trapped, immobilized by a single, meticulously planned operation. The defenders, having executed every step flawlessly, prepared for potential follow-up attacks, knowing that war rarely allowed moments of complete safety. Yet in these critical minutes, the operation had achieved its primary objective, halting the advance of a mechanized force through precision, timing, and courage. The frozen river, the destroyed bridge, and the immobilized Panzers created a scene of both mechanical failure and human triumph. The calculated collapse had demonstrated the convergence of skill, courage, and technology. Every angle, human, tactical, technological, leadership, enemy, morale, had come together to create a decisive turning point in the small but strategically significant theater. And as the defenders observed the results, they understood that this single moment would echo in reports, memories, and military analysis long after the ice had melted and the forest reclaimed its silence. The immediate aftermath of the bridge collapse was a scene of controlled chaos. 12 German Panzers lay immobilized, half submerged in the icy river, others resting at precarious angles atop fractured beams. Engines cooled to silence, their crews confined or attempting to escape into the snow-laden banks. Smoke still rose from scorched planks and damaged fuel lines, mingling with the morning mist. For the defenders, the tension of the previous hours remained. Success in execution did not eliminate risk. Patrols moved carefully, ensuring no German soldiers could regroup for a counterattack or attempt to salvage equipment under artillery fire. Casualties were minimal compared to the potential scale of disaster. Some German crews sustained minor injuries, primarily from slipping in ice or being struck by falling timbers. No defenders were lost in the initial engagement, a testament to the meticulous planning and concealment of artillery positions. Lieutenant Ivanov and his team moved along the riverbank, surveying the frozen wreckage, recording details for reports, and ensuring all charges had detonated as intended. Their preparation had created a scenario in which human ingenuity and engineering precision outweighed brute force. German command quickly assessed the situation. The 1th Panzer Regiment was temporarily neutralized in this sector, delaying their operational objectives. Engineers were dispatched to evaluate salvage options, but the frozen river, collapsed structure, and unpredictable timber debris made rapid recovery impossible. Commanders realized that underestimating enemy ingenuity had led to this setback. Reports later emphasized the significance of timing, planning, and observation in creating vulnerabilities even against mechanized forces. The tactical pause forced by the immobilized Panzers disrupted supply lines and slowed advances in adjacent sectors. The local front saw a shift in momentum. Where previously the German armor had dominated movement through narrow corridors, the collapse demonstrated the effectiveness of small, well-coordinated defensive units. Artillery and infantry positions that might have seemed insignificant gained renewed strategic value. Commanders on both sides re-evaluated the importance of reconnaissance, bridge durability, and the potential for precision demolitions to influence larger operations. What might have appeared to be a minor skirmish became a notable event in regional operational planning. Soldiers involved on both sides reflected on the psychological impact. For the defenders, the success validated months of training and reinforced trust in leadership. Discipline, patience, and adherence to meticulous planning proved decisive. For the German crews, the incident underscored the vulnerability inherent in rigid formations and predictable routes. Experienced tank operators had been trapped not by superior numbers or firepower, but by a single innovative strategy executed with precision. Memoirs from Panzer crews later described the scene as surreal, engines running, vehicles immobilized, and the realization that their mobility, a defining advantage, had been neutralized in moments. Strategically, the bridge collapse had consequences beyond the immediate river crossing. The immobilization of the Panzers delayed the regiment's movement toward critical supply routes and frontline positions. Intelligence reports highlighted the event as an example of tactical disruption. A small unit, using local terrain and engineering, could influence broader operational timelines. This reinforced lessons for both Soviet and German forces. Defenders recognized the potential for similar strategies in future engagements, while German commanders emphasized the importance of thorough reconnaissance and the risk of complacency. From a technical perspective, the operation demonstrated the reliability and effectiveness of delay fuses in demolition work. Explosive engineers studied the event closely, noting the precise sequencing required to trap multiple armored vehicles simultaneously. The method became a reference point for subsequent operations, highlighting how careful calculations and incremental adjustments could amplify impact without unnecessary risk to personnel. Observers emphasized that the fusion of human calculation, tactical planning, and mechanical engineering was what enabled a relatively small defending force to achieve such disproportionate results against a larger armored contingent. Reports filed immediately after the operation detailed structural damage, vehicle immobilization, and operational delays. Every aspect of the bridge failure was documented: which beams gave way first, how the Panzer's weight contributed to sequential collapses, and how freeze conditions influenced timber failure. Lieutenant Ivanov's meticulous records provided a blueprint for similar operations elsewhere, earning him recognition within military engineering circles. Analysts highlighted the intersection of careful planning and opportunistic execution, underscoring that even highly mechanized armies could be stalled by calculated ingenuity in the right environment. The frozen river itself bore witness to the event. For weeks afterward, the twisted timbers and immobilized vehicles remained a visible reminder of human precision overcoming raw mechanized force. Local soldiers and villagers described the scene as both terrifying and remarkable, an example of how preparation, observation, and courage could redefine expectations in warfare. The combination of timing, calculation, and discipline had transformed a simple bridge into a decisive tool of strategy, leaving both sides reassessing assumptions about armored mobility and defensive tactics. As reports reached regional commanders, the operation was recognized not merely as a defensive success, but as a case study in combining terrain, technology, and human judgment. The frozen river crossing had become a textbook example. Preparation, leadership, and ingenuity could triumph over numbers, armor, and firepower when executed with precision. And while the immediate engagement had ended, its ripple effects would shape decisions and strategies across the front for months to come, setting the stage for further analysis, recognition, and operational learning. The longer-term consequences of the bridge collapse were significant, both tactically and strategically. The immobilization of the 12 German Panzers delayed their regiment for various weeks, forcing a realignment of operational priorities along the frozen river front. Supply lines were interrupted, infantry movements slowed, and armored reinforcements diverted to clear the wreckage. For the defenders, this delay was more than a temporary victory. It provided critical breathing room to reinforce positions, redistribute artillery, and plan countermeasures. The frozen river, once merely a geographic feature, had become a strategic asset. Its control bought at the cost of careful planning and extraordinary precision. Reports from both sides later highlighted the psychological and operational impact. German commanders acknowledged that the destruction of the bridge was not a random stroke of luck, but a carefully calculated maneuver. Memoirs of Panzer crews described the immobilization as surreal. Engines running, tracks spinning uselessly over fractured beams, and men trapped inside armored hulls. For the defenders, the success reinforced confidence in the effectiveness of small unit ingenuity against a mechanized opponent. Engineers, artillerymen, and infantry all recognized that disciplined coordination could produce outsized results in a theater dominated by mobility and firepower. Recognition for the gunner, Lieutenant Pavel Ivanov, was immediate within military engineering circles. His meticulous planning, precise timing, and understanding of mechanical load distribution became case studies for both current operations and future military training. Deliberate use of delay fuses to manipulate enemy movement was acknowledged as an innovation in field engineering, demonstrating how seemingly minor technological adjustments could yield decisive outcomes. His ability to integrate human observation with mechanical execution ensured the operation's success and minimized casualties among his own unit. The strategic implications extended beyond the river valley. The German 12th Panzer Regiment's delay impacted broader operational timelines, influencing battles further south, where reinforcements were expected. Commanders on both sides reassessed assumptions about armored mobility. For German strategists, it was a reminder that even superior machinery could be neutralized by calculated planning and terrain awareness. For defenders, the event became a model of efficiency. A small, well-trained unit could achieve disproportionate effect when combining human skill, tactical foresight, and technological understanding. Historical analyses of the event highlight several enduring lessons. First, terrain and environmental conditions can amplify the effectiveness of precise operations, particularly when mobility is restricted. Second, human ingenuity, exercised through observation, timing, and disciplined execution, remains a decisive factor, even in the age of mechanized warfare. Third, technology is not inherently dominant. Its value depends on how well it is understood and applied in context. In this instance, the Panzer's strength became its vulnerability, and the defender's careful application of explosives turned enemy advantage into liability. Local reports and post-war analyses further underscore the operational learning derived from this engagement. Engineers studied beam stresses, timber quality, and fuse timing, integrating these insights into broader training programs. Commanders emphasized reconnaissance, risk assessment, and the value of anticipating enemy assumptions. The incident became an example in military schools, demonstrating how tactical innovation could influence operational outcomes without requiring overwhelming numbers or resources. The psychological aftermath also shaped morale and strategic thinking. Defenders gained confidence in their ability to influence larger engagements with ingenuity rather than brute force, fostering a culture of disciplined innovation. German forces, conversely, were reminded that success relied not only on armor and numbers, but on situational awareness and adaptability. The immobilization of 12 Panzers by a single well-executed demolition left an enduring impression on both sides, influencing planning, caution, and respect for localized tactical skill. Recognition of the gunner's role continued beyond immediate reports. Lieutenant Ivanov's name appeared in post-war analyses as an example of tactical brilliance under pressure. Here, scholars and military historians highlighted his ability to integrate technical skill, human judgment, and leadership. The operation exemplified the principle that small unit effectiveness, careful planning, precise timing, and discipline can alter the course of an engagement against a seemingly superior force. This principle resonated in subsequent military thought, shaping both defensive doctrine and engineering innovation. In the broader context, the bridge collapse was more than an isolated tactical success. It demonstrated the importance of anticipating enemy movement, leveraging environmental factors, and coordinating human and technological elements. The frozen river became a symbol of ingenuity triumphing over machinery, and the immobilized Panzers, a testament to the risks inherent in underestimating an opponent's resourcefulness. The operation reinforced the idea that precision, timing, and human judgment can decisively influence outcomes in warfare, even in the shadow of mechanized power. The frozen river remained a silent witness to the event. Over weeks, engineers and soldiers surveyed the wreckage, recovered equipment, and documented the operation. The immobilized tanks, fractured beams, and scorched planks provided tangible evidence of success, reinforcing the lessons learned. Both sides absorbed the consequences, the defenders in terms of operational advantage and morale, the Germans in terms of disruption and caution. And while the war continued beyond the river valley, the impact of this small but decisive action echoed through strategy, training, and historical memory, demonstrating the enduring value of precision, ingenuity, and human skill in warfare. The collapse of the bridge on January 17, 1942, stands as a remarkable testament to the convergence of human ingenuity, precise timing, and tactical foresight. In the frozen expanse of Eastern Europe, a single artillery gunner, supported by a disciplined team of engineers and infantry, transformed a fragile wooden structure into a decisive instrument of war. 12 German Panzers, symbols of mechanized power and confidence, were rendered immobile not by superior numbers or firepower, but by calculation, patience, and understanding of physics. This moment illustrates a fundamental truth about warfare. Technology alone does not guarantee victory. The Panzer crews relied on armored might and momentum, yet those same strengths became vulnerabilities when subjected to careful analysis and clever application of explosives. Lieutenant Pavel Ivanov's meticulous planning, the soldiers' disciplined execution, and the exploitation of terrain turned an ordinary bridge into a tool of extraordinary strategic significance. The success demonstrated that even small, under-resourced units could impose outsized effects when human skill and tactical innovation were applied with precision. Beyond its immediate tactical impact, the event left a lasting impression on both sides. German forces were reminded of the dangers of predictability and overconfidence, while defenders gained confidence in their capacity to influence larger operations through ingenuity and preparation. Engineers and strategists studied the collapse for lessons in timing, load distribution, and coordination, ensuring that the principles demonstrated here informed future engagements. Yet perhaps the most enduring legacy is human. The operation shows how courage under pressure, calm calculation, and trust in teamwork can alter outcomes in the most extreme circumstances. The frozen river, the shattered bridge, and the immobilized tanks serve as enduring symbols of the intersection of strategy, human intellect, and courage. A reminder that in war, as in life, precision, patience, and ingenuity often triumph over sheer force. In the silence after the explosions, amidst the snow and smoke, history paused to witness the quiet power of a small unit, proving that even in the vast machinery of war, the human mind remains the ultimate weapon.